What do you get when you put Meshuggah, Justin Timberlake, Megan Thee Stallion, and Polyphia in a blender? You get this album. What's up, everybody? I'm Finn McKenty. This is the Punk Rock MBA, and today I'm here to bring you a review of the brand new album by Issues, Beautiful Oblivion. Before I get into it, I wanted to really quickly mention two things. First of all, I started a Patreon a couple months ago, so if you're interested in supporting the channel over there, you get all kinds of cool stuff like an audio-only podcast feed of the videos, private Discord server, a bunch of other stuff. Second, I would love it if you give me a follow on Instagram. There's a link to that in the description as well. And with that out of the way, let's get into it. So in the title for this video, I called this a prog metal masterpiece, right? And a lot of you were probably going, prog metal? What? Black smoke coming out of your ears, getting ready to angrily mash the keyboard and leave some comment like, excuse me, have you ever heard of Devin Townsend? Okay, deep breaths, my friends. It's gonna be okay. But that said, I do get it. Calling this prog metal is not really 100% accurate because this album was way more than just prog metal. So that part's not accurate, but what is true is that this is a masterpiece. Beautiful Oblivion is the third album by Issues, and I'm just gonna say it. I think that these guys are the most innovative, sophisticated artists in rock, and this is the most exciting, fresh, interesting album I've heard in, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. And just to give you a little bit of a preview of what to expect in this album, it sounds like this. 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 And this. As you just heard, it's kind of hard to put a label on this band, especially on this album, which takes things even further than their previous album, Headspace, did. Beautiful Oblivion just picks up where that album left off and keeps running with all the ideas they introduced there, which says a lot because that was even a pretty experimental, adventurous album itself. And if you're an Issues fan, there's a few things you'll just immediately notice when you put this album on. The first one being no more screaming. I guess there's a little bit of it here and there in a couple songs, but it's essentially no longer part of the sound, and also no longer part of the band is Michael Bohn, the screamer who was with them on all the releases up until this one. And I'm not going to get into any of the gossip or drama about Michael and why he left or this or that, because that's none of my business, and frankly, I don't care. But I will say that in my honest opinion, they sound way, way, way better without the screaming. And honestly, I wasn't expecting that because I'm so used to hearing them with screaming. In fact, it's just the opposite. It sounds so like natural and comfortable that kind of makes me wonder why they ever had screaming at all. And second, they pretty much walked away from anything that you could call metalcore and really doubled down on the like funk, jazz, soul, R&B elements to the point where now I think you would call them like an R&B or fusion band with metal elements, not the other way around. And honestly, as much as I loved this version of Issues back in 2012, 2013, that version is gone, and what they become, to me, is light years better than what they were doing back then. Feels like that was just practice for what they're doing on Beautiful Oblivion. And since I know these guys pretty well, let me just kind of try to give you a little bit of context on who they are, where they're coming from, and maybe help you wrap your head around this album a little bit. I remember there was this girl at my high school that could draw like absolutely anything from scratch. Like you'd go, hey Mary, can you draw a pelican? And she'd go, oh, I don't know, I'll try. And then 2 minutes later, boom, it's like the best drawing of a pelican you've ever seen in your life. And you're like, what the fuck? How does she do that? It seems like magic, but the answer is simple. She spent years and years and years honing her craft, and she's just that fucking good. The guys in Issues are the musical equivalent of that girl. The honest truth is that most bands in that scene, or bands in general, are not really musicians in the real sense of the word. They're just like guys who can write some pretty cool riffs. And sometimes they string together those riffs and they scream over it, and it ends up sounding pretty cool. And to be clear, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Like, I don't think you need to know a bunch of theory or anything like that, or have great chops to write cool, catchy songs. I mean, Green Day is a perfect example of this, right? But to do what Issues does, well, that is a different ballgame. To do that, you need both a very broad musical vocabulary and you need the chops to express that vocabulary. And that is exactly what they bring to the table. Just to really drive home what I'm talking about here, let me share a few of the other projects that these guys have been involved with just basically on the side for fun. First of all, Forest of Grey, which is Sky's, I guess, like black gaze, progressive black metal kind of band. The guitarist AJ has done a couple other things. For example, he collaborated with a melodic hardcore band called Carried Weight. Sky Ty's brother Ty technically isn't in the band anymore. He used to be the DJ and the guitar guy. Technically not in the band anymore, but he still writes and produces with them, so I kind of consider him a member of the band still. But now he's working as a solo artist under the name Lophiile, doing stuff that sounds like this. And this.
I'm a liar and an ugly crier.
And on the like complete other side of the musical spectrum, he also played drums in a like very, very sick deathcore band called Memoria Brooded. Tyler Carter, the singer, has a couple albums of pop that's basically just like straight up boy band worship, and Ty actually produced a good chunk of this stuff. And last up, Josh, the drummer. He's one of these guys that's just like a musical chameleon. If you look at his YouTube channel, he covers everything from like Childish Gambino to Suicide Boys to Under Oath, all over the place. And he's done some other cool stuff like producing for the country artist Jon Langston. You might remember him from their song Young and Dumb. The point I'm trying to make here is this. Basically, these guys can do whatever they want when it comes to music. Issues are one of the very, very rare bands that has the musical toolbox to write and play anything they want in any genre. They're just that good. And they're pulling from a library of influences that's just way, way broader than any band you might consider their peers. And this is why they sound so just completely different from anybody else. Like when you hear some bands talk about their influences, they're like,
"Oh dude, our influences are all over the place. We listen to anything from Architects to Bring Me the Horizon."
On the other hand, Issues' influences are basically anything that sounds cool in any genre from any era ever. I mean, look at some of the stuff on this playlist that Sky made of the inspiration for their album. Meshuggah, Kim Petras, Loathe, Keith Urban, Kalani, Maroon 5, Rich Brian, Catatonia. And actually this makes perfect sense, because if you think about it, the best bands in any genre rarely pay attention to the genre that they themselves are in. Like I remember reading interviews with Scott Ian from Anthrax back in the day and feeling so like confused and hurt and betrayed when he said that he listened to Madonna, not like Creator and Exodus. I was like, what the hell, man? I thought I knew you. Who are you? But now, of course, it makes perfect sense to me. Like, he plays in a thrash band. He doesn't want to go home and listen to thrash all day.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's an easy one.
So what really stands out to me on this album is how they've just really tripled down on the like funk, R&B, fusion kind of elements. They've always been there, of course, but in this album, they really went like full jazz. That's DJ AZZ, gent plus jazz. For example, listen to stuff like this Chick Corea song from 1987. Or this Herbie Hancock song from 1973. Put some djenty guitars and like boy band pop vocals in those songs and you've got yourself an Issues track, right? From what I've seen, a lot of people are surprised by how far they went in that direction in this album, especially like Flexin', for example, which by the way, I think is a great song. But is that really a surprise coming from Issues? Remember, this is the band that had a gospel choir on their first album.
Well, I need you now to hold my head.
Anyway, the whole album is fucking great. I think you should just sit down right now, put on some headphones, listen to the whole thing from start to finish. But if I had to pick one song as my personal favorite, it would be Fine Forever.
What about love? What about love? Do we just enough to keep it low key?
Just kind of has everything. It's got a sax solo, it's got a gospel choir, it's even got some like bluesy southern rock guitars in there, and it all just kind of works. To me, that's like Issues in a nutshell.
What about love? If it finds us, do we take it to the chapel so sweet?
I know this might ruffle some feathers, but as somebody who's been into the like jazz, prog, metal thing since the 90s, I've listened to all of it. I think this is the best album the genre has ever seen. To me, this album is like the logical extension of what all those bands like Cynic and Atheist and Pestilence and stuff started doing back in the late 80s, early 90s. And also, I want to give a quick shout out to my friend Chris Crummett, who mixed and mastered this as well as all the other Issues albums. I think he's kind of cemented his place as honestly the best in the world when it comes to this stuff. Like, I guess you would call it post-hardcore. I don't think anybody does it better than he does, and he nailed it on this album as he always does. I've I've been a huge fan of this band since the very beginning. I actually remember exactly where I was, exit 181B by the Alderwood Mall on I-5, when I heard King of Amarillo for the first time, and it got to that R&B breakdown kind of part, and I was like, what in the fuck is this?
If they let you into heaven, then I ride go to hell. You think you're buying your way to the top with all that bullshit that you steal.
And they just kept getting better. The first album was awesome. It was basically like metalcore with boy band kind of elements on top of it. And I think the last song of that album, Disappear, was kind of a preview of what they were capable of. And on their second album, Headspace, that's really where they came into their own with songs like The Realist and Flojo that leaned super hard on like the slap bass and R&B grooves, but it still wasn't their final form. And in hindsight, I don't know if they would agree with me, but I actually think that trying to fit the screaming vocals in kind of held them back. And so that brings us here to their third album, Beautiful Oblivion, which to me, this is just like the album that they were meant to make. And in my opinion, it's the new standard for progressive metal. Polyphia probably comes the closest, but there's just nobody else bringing this combination to the table of like groove, chops, and pop sensibility to the table all in one package. It's super experimental and adventurous, but it's still catchy, accessible, full of hooks. It always puts the song first. And so you might be asking yourself, all that sounds right. Well, why don't more bands do this? Well, to put it simply, because they can't.
So I play bass, and us bass players aren't used to a whole lot of attention, but this is cool.
Because to do what Issues does, you have to have a level of musical depth that, to be honest, very, very, very few people in heavy music have. Sure, there's plenty of people that can play, but that's the easy part, right? Like shredding, that's just a physical challenge. Anybody can do that with enough practice. But doing something this creative and fresh, especially without turning it into like an experimental mess, that is something truly special that very few artists are capable of doing. And honestly, I'm blown away with what they did on this album. I'm sure Beautiful Oblivion is gonna turn off a fair amount of people because any art that does something new and different and pushes the envelope is always going to turn off a few people, but I think the people who get it are going to like really, really get it. Really, I just hope that this album inspires anybody out there who's making music to just dig in, get better at their craft, expand their musical palette, like push yourself to do something better and different. To be clear, I'm not saying that everyone should go out there and like memorize Herbie Hancock's catalog and learn how to play slap bass so you can copy Issues. I mean, you could do worse than that, but what I'm saying is go find your thing, whatever that is. Don't just settle for cloning your favorite band. Push yourself to do something different, go outside your comfort zone, color outside the lines, and don't be afraid to alienate a few people along the way. To me, that is what this album stands for, and I'm super proud of the guys in Issues and their production team for what they did. Bravo. Should we do a slow clap? Well, there you go. My first ever album review. Let me know what you thought about this. Let me know what you think about this album. Let me know if you would like me to do more album reviews in the future. I will consider it. I've always said I didn't want to do them, but this one was kind of fun, and maybe I'll do them from time to time if you guys are interested. Let me know what you think in the comments. I also want to thank everyone who supports me on Patreon at the True Cult level or above. And those people are Andy B, Anthony C, Amber G, B Sacrilegious, Claudian KR, End of May, Jeff W, John R, Jonas E, Jordan H, Justin H, Luke S, Michael B, Militant Me, Nicholas G, Richie H, Ridley H, Ryan W, Sixto U, and The Quiet Canvas. You guys are true cult fans. I appreciate your support very, very much. If you would like to sponsor me on Patreon, there's a link in the description. Patrons get access to a bunch of cool stuff like an audio podcast feed of all the videos, monthly live Q&As. I review your bands and social media presences and all that stuff. There's a private Discord server. So if any of that sounds interesting, hit that link in the description. And with that, I will sign off for now, but I will see you next time.